Texas's workforce. They teach us. They inspire us. They take us to new heights. They make the things that make our lives better and open doors to a brighter tomorrow. These aren't just workers doing a job. They're people doing a job well. They keep Texas running, and that matters to you, and it matters to us. We're Texas Mutual Insurance Company, the state's #1 workers' comp provider. Every day, we're on the job with 1.5 million Texas workers. And every day, we have the same goal, getting each and every one of them home safe to their families. With safety resources, training technologies, dividends, and a total commitment to service, Texas Mutual is changing the way workers' comp works for you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the Texas Soccer Summit presented by the Striker Texas. I'm John Arnold. We're so glad that you can join us today, and so glad that we can start our panels today with this panel about the foundations of Texas soccer and the lessons that Texas taught you on the way to stardom. Who's you? In this case, we're delighted to be joined by Carla Overbeck. If you can think of a trophy in soccer, it's probable that Carla has it in her trophy case. She's a former defender and captain of the U.S. women's national team, member of the legendary North Carolina team that ran off a 95-match unbeaten streak and won 4 titles on the way to that, gold medal, World Cup champion, and a member of the National Soccer Hall of Fame. And she's also been coaching at Duke since 1992, very involved with that program there. Carla, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to our conversation today. Welcome.
John, thanks so much for having me.
As I mentioned, it's a total pleasure, and we're going to dig into a little bit about your past and the experiences that you had here in Texas that made you the player that you were and the person that you are today. So if we can just start out chatting a little bit about kind of what makes you Texan, what gives you the standing to kind of speak on that topic. You were born in California. I don't know if you got here as soon as you could, like some people like to say, but grew up here in the Dallas area where I'm sitting as well. So can you kind of tell us your experience of getting to Texas and what your memories are maybe of being Texan such that it is?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thanks for having me on. It's a great event, and I'm glad I can be a part of it. So I actually moved to Dallas from California when I was around 5. My dad was transferred in the business he was in. So we, made that trek to Texas, and, I'm proud that I was raised there, and I feel like I have some good ideals, and they taught me a lot of great things, not just in soccer, but I think in my life. And, I played for the Dallas Sting. That's kind of how I got into soccer. I played rec for SVAA at the beginning, and then wanted a little bit more competitive environment. And so started with the Sting when I was 14 years old. And, I loved growing up in Texas. I have 3 older siblings, and, basically they and the sport of soccer, I feel like, taught me so many great things about life and, how to be competitive and how to be a great teammate. And, definitely I got my grit, I think, from my older siblings having to fight for everything that I got. So I really enjoyed growing up there. I haven't been back for a while because when I left to go to school in 1986, I just stayed in North Carolina. So, but I'm proud, to grow up there and have so many great memories there.
We won't hold the North Carolina portion against you, except for the barbecue. I'm not sure we can reconcile the brisket versus the mustard sauce, but we'll leave that conversation for another time. Tell me more about the Dallas Sting, that club that was, I think, so influential for you. It was a very serious club. I think won a pair of national titles, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even more kind of during that time, although the club landscape looked quite different than it does now. So tell us more about the Sting in general and also how it helped make you an elite player.
Yeah, so definitely I was proud to be a part of it. It's a club that nationally was very well known. Like I said, I played rec soccer until I was 14, and back then they just had U16, U18, U19, and so I was playing up a couple of years. And I know when I went to tryouts, I was like tiny. I was really skinny and I was little, and I made the under 14 team. And I think, at first they were kind of hesitant putting me on the team just because I was so slight and so small. But my dad said, she earned it, let her have a shot at it. And so, was on the U14 team, or U16 team, sorry, when I was 14. And, they just, being part of a team is such a great experience. You have to kind of put your own goals and dreams aside for the betterment of the team. And that the Sting organization, really kind of formed my competitive nature. I mean, a lot of times, we had to run 2 miles before every practice even started. And so we'd have to get there, run 2 miles, and then finally the ball would come out and we'd all be excited. And, we'd get a chance to actually play the game. But I think they instilled in me just the work ethic, how important it is to, put your stamp on the game straight away. And I was very lucky that, and fortunate that I was able to be a part of that club because, like you said, we did win some championships. And it was really formative, I think, for my soccer and my life, basically.
How do you kind of remember, I guess, the landscape of club soccer, youth club soccer in that time? Because I think we have these conversations, and a lot of times it's very easy for myself as a media member to sort of frame it as the battle days, right? Where it's like, now we have these setups where, you mentioned, hey, U14 was sort of the youngest age level. Maybe there was no touches on the ball until after doing conditioning. And maybe we don't think of that as kind of the most modern method now or the most modern setup. But at the same time, it seems like there was a competitive environment that allowed you and other girls like you to become quite good players, to become the best players in the world in some instances. So kind of what are your memories of kind of what the landscape was with the Sting, but also with other area clubs and even on the national level?
Yeah, so I know the Sting, we trained, I think, a couple of times a week. I know now with the DAs, and now that DA is no longer there with the ECNL, they're training pretty much every day. And so I know that was a big difference. I was on a team with older girls and older players, so I felt like I had to, fight and scrap for everything. And just the way they kind of aligned the training sessions, we competed all the time. And, in running, we competed, and actually playing, we competed. And I just feel like, back then, it wasn't as much skill development as it is nowadays. You have these trainers that just come in and they do, certain skills with teams. Obviously, when they come to universities, we want them to, have all the aspects of their game, the vision, the skill, the work ethic, everything. And so I feel like in Texas, just growing up there and how people are so proud of their state and where they came from, I carried that with me to North Carolina and competed there collegiately.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about that kind of Texas mentality, were there some drawbacks? Were there things that you maybe wish had been done differently now that you look back and reflect, or even at the time said, this isn't fun, but now it served me? Maybe the running is one example, but are there things that you think, maybe if I had come up in a different state, it would have actually been better? Are there negatives, I guess, to the Texas experience such that it was that you had it?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is I know it worked for me because, from a very young age, and I know probably my siblings had a lot to do with this too, is just competing. And, I felt like I said earlier, I had to fight for everything that I got. And I feel like that was the same way with soccer too, because I was sort of on the younger side on most of my teams. But I'm not sure that, I don't know any differently. But I feel like Texas kind of hardened me for, that next level, whether it's collegiate or with the national team. I felt like, I had been through so many things just in my life as far as like competing, that college, it prepared me for college, it prepared me for, every day on the national team, competing against the best players in the country and even in the world. We're here in the United States. And so I'm fortunate that my upbringing there, kind of helped me later in life.
It sounds like your upbringing in the home also was a very critical element, maybe more so than some of the kind of environmental factors of Texas or North Texas. You mentioned competition with your siblings. Was there kind of ever a doubt that you were going to play soccer? Was that always the path? And how did you how did that reflect itself in the home?
Yeah, back then you could play every sport. And so I did. I played basketball, I played volleyball, I played softball, soccer. And that's just kind of what you did as a kid. Like when the season would come around for that sport, you would play that sport. So right now, where they play soccer year round, we also did that. But then you could also do other sports, which I think help each other. Playing basketball, you move your feet, you're marking somebody, you're guarding somebody. So I feel like they all kind of helped each other. But definitely growing up and being the baby of four, they did teach me a lot how to be competitive. And I didn't like soccer the best. I was just probably that was the sport that I was the best at. And I would have loved to play basketball in college, but it just kind of the way the cards fell. For sure, soccer was what I was the best at. So.
Do you think that specialization, obviously it has a place, right? Obviously we've seen, you mentioned the players that you as a coach at Duke now want to see. You want them to come in with a technical base, a physical base, vision, these things that we need to be teaching that specific coaches can work on, that sometimes that the various elements of the game that need to be honed. But at the same time, there's also kind of, I think, the life benefit, right, of learning to play on a team, as you mentioned as well, of kind of understanding, maybe I learned this from basketball and I can port this over to my soccer game, because as a point guard I had to look for players in a certain place, and that helps me as an attacking midfielder, as a 10, whatever. Right? I mean, maybe it's not that specific case, but are we specializing too soon from your perspective? You have that experience of diverse sports. Is there a way to replicate that now in today's modern era?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so, especially if you have dreams and aspirations to play on that national team. Just the age at which they're starting the skill development is so young now. And, they make it, or the clubs make it so that you don't have time to do another sport. So I felt like I was pretty lucky in the day and age that I grew up. I mean, Christine Lilly, same thing. Mia Hamm, same thing. If you ask all my former national team teammates, they played so many other sports. But I feel like current national team players now, they were asked to specialize a little bit sooner. And clearly it's working for them because they're at the national team level and killing it. So I can't say one or the other. I'm just glad I grew up in a time where I could experience all those other sports.
Absolutely. One thing that I think may have been a drawback for you growing up and coming up when you did was the kind of what appears to me to be a lack of club options, right? You look at the NWSL now, the number of American and North American players playing in European leagues, with the fantastic league in England that now is so competitive in France. That didn't really seem to be, there wasn't infrastructure in place, I don't think, for your generation. When you look at the club landscape from when you came up in the club landscape now, what do you feel? What are your emotions, and how do you kind of compare the two?
Yeah, I mean, when I was playing, it was just the United States, and that's it. I know Brandy, a couple of my teammates played over in Japan, some in Sweden, so that option was available. I was such a homebody that I wanted to stay right where I was, and I didn't want to do many overseas opportunities. But it's unbelievable how it has changed, and now all the major men's clubs over in Europe are now having women's teams, and you see a lot of the U.S. team players going over to play in those leagues and for those teams. And it just that didn't happen when I was growing up. And not to mention, you can turn on the TV or online any day of the week at any time, and you can find a soccer game, which, when I was growing up, we didn't have, role models to look up to in my sport because there was no national team. And, Troy Aikman or Roger Staubach was one of my idols because I loved the Cowboys, and obviously I couldn't play professional football, and so the opportunities that are out there now for young women and even young men is they have these great role models to look up to in their sport, and I just didn't have that growing up.
you have to be proud at the same time that you have served that role for a lot of young girls for this generation. I mean, how does it feel to know that you're a reference, a role model, and kind of were able to set that example, even though it would have been nice to have that example that you could have idolized a women's soccer player instead of Roger Staubach? Nothing against Roger Staubach, obviously, but how does it feel that you have served at that? And you hear from players still that say, yeah, I watched you, I remember that 99 team. I'm sure it was so influential.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great feeling to know that, what you're doing is helping young people and young kids. And, yes, I didn't have that growing up, but I love that some of the current players on the U.S. team, watched us play, or some of the recruits that we get, they had posters of our national team up in their rooms. And so I feel like my generation and what we've done for the game of soccer, just not in our country, but worldwide. I mean, I feel like the U.S. has provided so many other countries with opportunities that maybe they wouldn't have had before. Just talking about, having kids and being a professional athlete. I mean, U.S. Soccer supported us fully with, they helped us with the nanny and provided, we brought the nanny, but then they helped pay for it. They would pay for a room, they pay for the flights. And so a lot of, European teams would talk to Joy and to myself and just say, how did you approach your federation to get that kind of support? And so, I feel proud that, our U.S. Soccer Federation, in turn helped some of the other countries during those times.
How cognizant of you, and it sounds like at least you were on some level, while you were achieving the things that you were achieving, that you were paving a path? Is that something you guys talked about in the locker room or in conversations between each other that hey, we are making, we are setting this model, we are becoming these role models that we had always lacked? Were you aware in the moment, or did it dawn on you later, hey, we're models, we're role models?
Right. I think, during it, you're so wrapped up in, what you want to do and winning and promoting the sport at the same time. And so I probably didn't get a grasp of just how big it was while I was playing. But at the same time, you know that you want to leave, like we all wanted to leave the national team in a better place. And I know through contract negotiations, they got kind of sticky sometimes. And, it wasn't always a pleasant thing, but we knew that we were fighting for our future so that the women that come after us, don't have to go through these same battles that we go through with our, with FIFA and with U.S. Soccer. And so we wanted to make sure that, we left the team in a better place than when we got there. And I feel like we did a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that fight continues. The current women's team with, I would say, very legitimate frustrations with sometimes the federation, sometimes FIFA, the governing body. I guess in some ways you have to sort of like, I don't want to say take what you can get, but there are certain jumps that can be taken, right? That kind of makes sense. As you have seen kind of the women's national team currently kind of leading the way and pushing for more. I don't know, what memories does it provoke as you kind of have those fights yourself, but then see the progress that's being made? How do you kind of weigh that balance up, I guess?
Yeah, I love that the current team is fighting for what they believe in and for what is right, because that's what we did. We were pioneers of our sport. And, when we thank all the women that have fought, women couldn't even play soccer back in the day. And so we were very thankful that so many women fought, for us to be able to play, and the whole Title IX issue. And I just love that the current team is continuing the fight. They're not happy with the equality, and they're not happy with some things and how they've been treated. And I love that they're fighting, because that's what my generation, with Foudy and Mia Hamm and Brandy and Christine and Joy Fawcett, Michelle Akers, we fought for what we believed in was right. And trust me, it wasn't a lot of money that we were fighting for, because we did it because we love the game and we love playing with each other. And we just wanted to continue to see the sport grow, not in our country, but globally.
One thing that's been kind of a topic is turf, playing on artificial surfaces. Taking it back to Dallas, did you play on some pretty gnarly fields? Are there any fields that you remember like, on that street corner. Now we're never playing there again. Like, were there any facilities that suffered in the Dallas area? You don't have to name them. In fact, it's probably better that you don't, because they might,
Yeah.
if they're sponsoring us or something like that. But what were some of the conditions like that you had to fight through? Whether it was a field, locker room issues, poor stadiums, or was it mostly good? Was the infrastructure built up here? What do you remember about the infrastructure?
I mean, I would have played on a parking lot. That's how much I love to play and be outside. Some of the fields weren't great just because looking back, they probably were overused. I mean, they were every single weekend, every time, you trained on them. Fortunately, I didn't have to play on turf that often. But, turf was it was concrete, and then it was a piece of, AstroTurf laid on top of it. It's not the rubber pellets that you get nowadays and the field turfs that you see. But, the fields were not great, but back then you're a kid, you didn't know. And I remember we'd be going through droughts and they'd be cracks in the field. Just, you could put your whole foot down in it. And that would always kind of make me laugh. But, as you get older, I'd like to go back and see some of those fields, because I'm sure now during these times that they're probably a lot better than they were when I was growing up. But like I said, it didn't matter. I'd play on concrete.
Yeah, those big ruts in the turf for the drought. That just improves your touch, right? In a lot of ways, it can
Yeah.
teach you different lessons as well. You're an assistant at Duke. You've been with Duke since 1992. How have you seen the player that comes to Duke change? How have you seen the player evolve? Whether you're recruiting in Texas or recruiting in Carolina or across the country, how are the players different than they were when you started in '92?
Yeah, they're definitely way more skillful than when I was coming out of youth soccer into college. I just think that I feel like we had more spaces to train on. I feel like nowadays they put more teams on one field. We had an entire field to train on, and nowadays it's like you get a half of a half. And so, I feel like technically they're really, really good, and maybe just I feel like just how they read the game and how they understand the game and how their positions are played is better, because they were able to watch all these professional players and teams. And, as far as the toughness and, the hardness that it takes to play at the national team level, maybe we don't see as much as that, because, I feel like when I was growing up, your coaches could do whatever to you. And now we've learned, the whole periodization of training sessions and seasons. And so that part I feel like maybe is a little bit lost.
It's interesting, and as the Striker Texas, this new media outlet we're launching, we're going to be covering soccer from the pro level, NWSL, like the Dash, all the way down to youth girls, even club level that you played at, Carla. I wonder what the media's role in this whole thing is, because I think that '99 team, as we've talked about, we're just a media sensation. You're in front of everyone on every TV, in every Sports Illustrated Sportswoman of the Year. It seems like the press certainly has a role to play in continuing to grow the women's game. What can we do, or what should we be doing to keep growing the game, especially on the girls and women's side in the state of Texas and more broadly?
Yeah, I think just promoting it, giving it equal time that the men get. I mean, I know when I was, even in the 80s and the 90s with the national team in 2000, they would market the teams differently. Like they would spend more money marketing. We'd go into a city and it would maybe be in the paper that morning, whereas the men would come into the city and they would market it, 3 weeks in advance. And so I think just giving the women and the young girls just equal opportunities to be great. And a lot of that is in how you market and how you promote and how you, just let people know that these games are coming into the area. So I think that's how the media can help, is just, just be equal, equal to the men as you are with the girls.
Yeah, we'll look to do our best on the striker, and I'm sure we'll screw up. And we want to be held accountable by you, by our audience, everyone who's watching this. So feel free to send angry tweets when we screw up, because I'm sure we will. But we'll do our best. Carla, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today. You've got a training session to get to here in 5 minutes or so. So we're about to let you go. But I wanted to know kind of your final thoughts, just a summary of what this we've titled this "The Lessons Texas Taught You on the Way to Stardom." When I say that, what do you think? What are your kind of what's your summation of our chat today?
Yeah, I was proud growing up in Texas, and just the lessons I learned, not just on the field, but my work ethic, and just how to be tough and how to compete and how to be a great teammate and how to be a leader. I was the captain of the national team for a long time, and I feel like I learned those qualities growing up in Texas, and being part of good teams that won championships, and how to deal with that, and put the team first, and just so many lessons I learned from the sport of soccer in the state of Texas. I mean, I'm proud to say that I grew up there, and like when you guys do things like this that relate to how I grew up, I want to be a part of it, with Texas Mutual, and I'm just glad that you guys reached out to me because I feel like the sport can continue to grow in a positive way, and not just Texas, but in all other sports as well.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, Carla. We've been thrilled to have you, and really thank you for taking the time, especially because it's the season with the change. We mentioned before we got our taped conversation going that the spring season is maybe the most important spring season in history, with the COVID changes and everything at Duke. So we wish you the best of luck with them. But thank you so much for joining us on the Texas Soccer Summit. Carla Overbeck, we really appreciate your time and hope to be chatting soon.
Yeah, John, thanks so much. I enjoyed it. Good luck.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in, for watching once again this panel, The Lessons Texas Taught You on the Way to Stardom. If you're just tuning in, don't forget that the panel will be archived. You can watch it again on TexasSoccerSummit.com or on the Striker Texas, where you can subscribe and get all sorts of great coverage. As I mentioned, men's side and women's side, youth to pro. We're trying to cover it all on the Striker Texas. This panel was brought to you by Texas Mutual. Texas Mutual Insurance Company is the state's #1 workers' comp provider, serving 70,000 policyholders and protecting more than 1.5 million Texans on the job each day. Texas Mutual focuses exclusively on workers' comp coverage for Texas businesses. Their mission is to provide a strong foundation for the businesses that rely on them, to take care of Texas's workforce, and to build stronger, safer communities. Stay with us on the Texas Soccer Summit at 2 p.m. Central Time. We'll have Chris Bills leading a panel on keeping youth soccer safe during the pandemic. We have several experts in the youth field on how the shift of COVID and keeping children and their parents and their coaches safe is possible. So that's going to be a great panel. We know you'll want to tune in for that. That's at 2 p.m. Central. Other panels we have this afternoon include a panel on Black Lives Matter, members of MLS Black Players for Change, the USL similar organization, and some female voices as well. On that panel, hosted by Victor Ariza, at 4 p.m. we'll be talking more women's soccer and how women can take soccer from hobby to pro, the new pro pathways that exist in the United States that Carla didn't have, as we talked about in the chat that we just had. What does that pathway look like now? That'll be hosted by Laura Gomez, and will be a fantastic one. And then this evening at 5 p.m., we'll be talking about how Texas should probably be bigger for professional soccer with just one professional team right now. Could that be growing in the future? We'll talk to some people involved in those efforts and also talk to people who are already working to make women's soccer even larger in this state. All that, as I mentioned, is on TexasSoccerSummit.com. But until the next panel, I'm John Arnold. Thank you so much, and take care.
Texas's workforce. They teach us. They inspire us. They take us to new heights. They make the things that make our lives better and open doors to a brighter tomorrow. These aren't just workers doing a job. They're people doing a job well. They keep Texas running, and that matters to you, and it matters to us. We're Texas Mutual Insurance Company, the state's #1 workers' comp provider. Every day, we're on the job with 1.5 million Texas workers. And every day, we have the same goal: getting each and every one of them home safe to their families. With safety resources, training technologies, dividends, and a total commitment to service, Texas Mutual is changing the way workers' comp works for you.